This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
Today on the Mighty MERP podcast, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Nina Stolzenberg, the Senior Director of Vocational and Justice Involved Services at Jewish Family Services of Atlantic and Cape May counties. And as many of our listeners know, I am currently the sitting president of JFS in Atlantic and Cape May County. Nina brings an extraordinary depth of clinical, vocational, and community-based expertise to her role. She earned her PhD in clinical psychology from Texas Tech University, completed both her pre- and postdoctoral internships at Children's Medical Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She then served as pediatric psychologist at the nationally ranked Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where she worked with children and families facing complex medical and emotional challenges. Since joining JFS, Nina has overseen transformative initiative designed to prepare individuals with significant barriers to employment, whether due to justice involvement, disability, mental health needs, or socioeconomic obstacles, to successfully enter the workforce. She also leads efforts to build strong partnerships with employers committed to be inclusive in hiring. Today, we'll talk about her professional journey, her work within justice-involved services, and most importantly, the powerful impact of vocational services in helping people reclaim stability, dignity, and opportunity. Nina, welcome to the Mighty MERP podcast.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to talk to you, and I always like to start with origin stories of my guests. So did you always know you wanted to work in psychology and community services, or did your path develop over time?
Well, so both my parents are social workers. And I don't know if you know this, but my mom actually was a director of a Jewish family service in Central Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was a camp director initially. And so I worked at camp because when your dad's an overnight camp director in another state, you can't stay home by yourself at 14.
I hear you. I know I'm interrupting, but I'm just going to tell you I didn't know these things. And I don't know if you know, but my kid's dad, my husband or ex-husband now, but my husband was a camp director and assistant camp director. And that's how we met. And my kids from the time they were born spent every summer at a sleepaway camp for the same reasons.
Same. Both my parents met at camp. And then I spent every summer at camp from the time I was born till about 20-something. And I found myself working a lot with the kids who didn't quite fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got older, I started working at more specialized camps that were particularly for kids with learning or emotional or behavioral challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where I got my start or my interest in this work.
So you went to school in Texas and then you were in Tulsa. So tell me a little bit about that experience of growing up in the East Coast and then.
It was really good. I think it was really useful because, we talk a lot about cultural humility, but I think that when you're the person whose culture is the minority culture, because, there's not a ton of, they would call me a Yankee in rural Texas, which is where I did some of my first jobs when I was in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes you get a sense of what it's like to be other. And I think that's really helpful in understanding other people's experiences.
What inspired you to join JFS after working in a major medical institution like CHOP?
So when I worked at CHOP, I loved the families I worked with, and it's a great institution. It's also really big. And if you have an idea or you think there's a service that could change or be helpful to the people that you're working with, there's not really an easy way to make that happen. I once tried to submit a grant, but I couldn't get it through the CHOP system
Hmm.
before the due date for the grant. And at JFS, I I'm in the same building most days as the CEO, the CIO. I report to the COO. If there's something I think could be helpful or interesting to look at, I can just walk into their office and we can talk about doing it.
Right. And JFS is open to new ideas,
Very.
which is one of the things I love about the organization as well. So, who were the mentors in your life that influenced you and shaped you to have the leadership and commitment to client-centered care that you have today?
Well, clearly it doesn't hurt to have two social workers as parents. And my mom went back to school when I was about 9 to get her BSW.
Mhm.
And then I saw her get her MSW, get her first jobs. And that was our dinner time talk.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sure
so
that was
uh,
extremely impactful.
I worked at, when I did my pre and my postdoc in Oklahoma, and then I worked there for a few years. I worked with Dr. Catherine Govertz and Dr. Janet Willis. And the work that they did, they were both psychologists who had previously been nurses.
Mhm.
And the work that they did and the education that they did, both with families and we were in the neurology department and with the neurologists about the kids in different ways that things could be approached or helping parents better understand what was going on with their child was just very influential.
Do you still keep in touch with those mentors?
With one of them, yes, one got really busy and I think we kind of fell out of touch. But my younger daughter's middle name is after one of her daughters.
Oh, I love that. How long have you been with JFS now?
19 years. A
19
little while.
years. Share the experience of how JFS has evolved and grown since you first joined the agency.
So when I first joined the agency, we were about half the size. We were almost exclusively in one building.
Mhm.
And now we have, I think it's 6 sites, but I can count them quick if you like.
You don't need to count them, but I would love to know when you say 6 sites, more importantly, where they're located in our community.
So we're in Atlantic City. We have a freestanding office. We're also co-located at the Atlantic City County building in Atlantic City. We have an office in Margate. We are also co-located at the Atlantic County Justice Facility.
Mhm,
We have a office site in Egg Harbor Township at the Atrium Apartments, and then we
mhm.
also have one in Cape May.
Correct, and I always like to say this because I don't know why people don't always realize this, is that we have all these offices and programs, and, JFS serves the whole community of Atlantic and Cape May County.
Hmm. And we actually do a fair amount of vocational services in Cape May County. One thing I just wanted to add was when I started at JFS, we didn't do vocational services. That's something that we've just started in the last about 15.
And how did that come about? I love this story.
So there's two pieces to it. My supervisor at the time, Tom Rubin, had some interest in it, and it was something we had been trying to do. But also, clearly I've been working in this field for more than a couple of years. And I would go out in the community and I would see the parents of kids that I had worked with, sometimes when they were, as young as 2 or 3. And they would come up to me and say, my child's 18, 19, 20, and we don't know what to do now. They can't
Mm,
get a job. We don't know if they can go to college. We're not sure what to do. So when JFS started looking into providing vocational services, I said, count me in because, this population of humans that I love to work with is hitting a wall and I don't want to see that.
So was it easy to have JFS on board and to step up to this, I would say, missing need in our community?
It was something they were looking at already. And our CEO, Andrea Steinberg, had been at another JFS previously that provided that service. And then at the time, the position was, I think, assistant director, was also interested in it. And as you pointed out, JFS is really open to trying new things when there's an identified need.
Let's talk about the clients that you're servicing that have employment barriers.
So what type of services we provide?
What are the clients you're working with specifically?
Okay. So it's a really wide range of people. Most of them are people who have disabilities, but not exclusively. And again, a very wide range of disabilities, from people who have very mild autism, have college or advanced degrees, but have trouble getting employment, to people who have more notable disabilities and may need some additional supports even once they start working to learn and keep performing their job well. We also do some work with people who are on TANF, which is temporary aid for needy families, and
Mhm.
who are looking to stop being on TANF but need help finding a job that that's going to help them support their family, and then also find all the other pieces they need. Because, for example, if you're a single mom, just having a job's not enough. You've got to have a plan of, what do you do when your kid's sick? What do you do when the plumber needs to come to your house or your apartment and you're supposed to be at work? So
Mhm.
helping people figure out all those pieces, maybe some assistance with getting a driver's license restored, those types of things, so that they're ready to work when they get a job.
And specifically, how does JFS and your team step in on the practical day-to-day to assist those individuals with the employment barriers?
So we serve somewhat different populations, and there's a little bit of nuance and, difference in what we provide to each person. But basically, the
It is
over
individualized then. There's
it's
not
very
a cookie cutter.
individualized. And, the commonalities for everybody are talking about what's their employment plan, which might include things like, what type of job do you want now, and maybe what job do you want 2 years from now? But also, how are you going to get to work? What type of work would work well for you? I used to tell the story of, I had a neighbor who every summer would hire a high school student to help him on his bread route. Well, I had a high school student who needed a job, except that the two qualities he needed were, they needed to be able to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And
Mhm.
she was, at that point in her life, not a morning person. And he needed somebody tall enough to reach the top row in the bread truck. And she's only 5'3". So, there was a job, but it wasn't going to be a good match for her and what she needed. So
Mhm.
making sure that works, making sure somebody has a transportation plan if they need it, taking a bus 2.5 hours every day to get to a job isn't necessarily sustainable long term, especially if you have any family obligations. So starting with, what type of work do you want to do? How do you get there? And not just transportation, but what's the path to getting that work? Helping people work on their resumes. And
Mhm.
That includes looking at their past employment, but also addressing things like, what if they don't have a lot of employment? What other skills do they have that we can highlight? Maybe they're the person who does home repairs for everyone in their family and their next door neighbor. Well, that's a great skill. And people, will hire you to do those things, even if you weren't paid to do it before.
Mm-hmm.
So, now they've got a resume. We're going to help people with applications. For some people, we may sit with them. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, we may help them identify the openings, and they can do that on their own. We help with interview prep, which can be anything from, how do you answer basic interview questions? What types of challenges do you have in an interview? We worked once with this really super bright young man who had a computer science degree, but he would get very anxious and his anxiety looked like he was angry. And nobody wants to hire the most hostile person they've ever seen to be their coworker. So
Mm-hmm.
helping him, address that, talking about things like, if you have a disability or a history of justice involvement, do you want to disclose that? And when do you want to disclose that? So that's the setup to help people get employment. And then we continue working with them once they get jobs.
How many case managers does JFS have? I know you're a superwoman, Nina, but I know you have a team.
In vocational services, so we have open positions if anyone wants to apply. And we have about 10 current case managers and 2 supervisors.
Sure. I'll let my child who's looking for a job know that he could apply to JFS to help other people look for a job.
Sometimes that can work. And, it's funny. I think the best vocational case managers are people who have, first off, worked lots of different types of employment, because what you can say to your manager when you work at Wendy's is very different than what you can say if you're working in a more professional position. But also, they're familiar with how discouraging it can be, because I think that's the other thing we do, is help people have hope. Because the one thing I can guarantee you is, if you're looking for a job, you will be rejected.
Yeah.
And people who haven't had a lot of success in their life or looking for jobs may take that really personally. And so helping them remember that that's part of the job search, is that people will say no to you.
Right. So that answers I don't even have to answer these questions, to ask these questions, Nina, which one of my questions was for individuals who've been out of the workforce for a long period, how do you help rebuild the confidence and the essential skills? Because uh, I'm sure that there is a lot of emotional and mental negativity when you haven't been in the workforce for a long time.
Hmm. I say sometimes I think it's a little bit like dating, that you have to find the right fit. But in the meanwhile, there's going to be a lot of things that aren't the right fit and that don't feel really great while you're trying to get there.
Right. Are you seeing any trends in the job market right now for individuals with employment barriers?
So it's interesting. Nationally, there's actually more people with disabilities employed overall than there have been in a long time. It's still people who are actively looking for employment, who have disabilities or justice involvement, are still employed at lower rates, but the difference is less than it has been since I've been doing this work.
Hmm. So I know in New Jersey that individuals that have justice involvement, which are people that are charged with crimes and usually have a conviction of some sort. I know that in New Jersey, we have a jobs program that was really established and encouraged by retired Superior Court Judge Mark Sanson.
Hmm.
And he really worked hard on getting big companies and even casinos, hospitals throughout New Jersey, not just in our area, but it did start in Atlantic, to get individuals who were justice involved the opportunity for employment, which has made a significant difference in our state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so how do you define and measure success within the vocational program?
Um, I think we look at a couple of different things. One is we're always taking a look at not just how many people have we helped to get employment, but how long is it taking? Because we don't want it to take a year for someone to get employment. So we keep track of how many days it takes from the
Mhm.
day that we start working with somebody until the day that they get employed, with our goal being that most people get employment within 90 days. Doesn't always happen, but that's what we would like to see. And then also, I think just with the individual stories, can I tell you too quickly?
You can tell me the stories, and I was going to ask if you would share specific stories of success.
So, one was a gentleman that we started working with who had a developmental disability, was living in a group home, was in his 60s, and had never worked before,
Mhm.
and got a job working at Old Navy doing stock, and called his job coach to thank her because he got his first paycheck, when really, like, we had not gone and done any of the stock work. He had absolutely earned that, but I forget if he was like 62, 63, but he'd never had a paycheck before. And so seeing that happen was really exciting. Um,
Mhm.
and then I, this week, um, we went to, myself and two other coworkers from JFS went to the Greater Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Awards, and
Mhm.
they were recognizing the top 20 under 40. And one of them is someone who serves on our community advisory board and also is our client and got his first job working with one of our job coaches.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was great seeing that. And he has completed the New Jersey Lend Fellowship through Rutgers University. He's been asked to speak on a number of panels, both one was at Princeton University, another was for a national network. And so seeing not just his success in terms of his career, but also in terms of his avocation of advocating for people with disabilities and who, particularly for him, are neurodiverse, to have employment and be seen as valuable members of the community.
Yeah. So I think you know this. I had a real moment last week when we were celebrating or promoting the vocational program of JFS. And there was a woman who spoke
Mhm.
regarding the vocational services that she received and the support that she received. Um, and it was an amazing story because she was there to share sort of what JFS did to help her. And I'm going to ask you to share the story. And then I'm going to tell you for me why it was just so impactful to be there that day to see?
So I will tell you some of the pieces I remember. We have enough clients that I don't unfortunately remember all the stories as well as I'd like to. That being said, having too many good stories to remember is a good problem.
Not a bad problem. I might be able to fill in some of the blanks too.
So
But why
it
don't we
was
talk about the event, first of all, that
right.
was at JFS?
So we have a grant from the Kessler Foundation, who also, by the way, have a podcast. Um, and it is allowing us to adopt an evidence-based employment approach called IPS, or individual placement supports. And so we had an event to introduce that approach to the community, and two clients who had obtained employment while working with a case manager using that approach spoke. And one of them was somebody who, when we first started working with her, was unhoused. And she, I believe, was in recovery at the time.
She was
And,
definitely a survivor of domestic violence, which she
yes,
talked about.
and she worked with her case manager initially to do some volunteer work at a local nonprofit, which can be a good way for people who have been who have not been employed to, start connecting with employment opportunities and develop some transferable skills. And then she was able to get full-time employment at that same nonprofit.
Right. And as a result of that, she now lives and has a home
Yes.
in Atlantic City. So the domino effect. So what was amazing about this story is this is a woman who I didn't think I knew and didn't recognize because she looked healthy and thriving and happy. And she shared her story, which, you know, many people, many people would not have had the fortitude that she did
Hmm.
to JFS out and volunteer and then get a job and do everything that she did. But while we were taking a picture as a group and everyone's talking, somebody asks me innocently for a pen. This client, JFS, what is the term that we use? Is she a,
In vocational services, we say client.
so
The
this,
agency overall will often talk about consumers.
okay, so the client said, "Oh, I have a pen." And then the other woman said, "No, no, I want Melissa, I want her pens. They're pink." And then the individual, the client looked at me and said, "Oh my God, Melissa." And I looked at her and she said, "Do you remember me?" And when she was homeless in Atlantic City, she would come to my office, which is right on Atlantic Ave. And she helped me out with a matter, but then would come back to my office every few weeks. And she would come back just to get pens. And because I had a candy bowl of Hershey Kisses, and she would come in and say, "Do you mind if I take a pen? I love your pens." And then she would eat some Hershey Kisses. Sometimes she'd use our restroom. And one of the times that she came in, we spoke, and I did say to her, "Call JFS.
Hmm.
They can help you." And I gave her the number, and and I told her that they could help her on a lot of different ways. And I don't know how much time went by between then and that she called JFS, but I have not seen her in about 2 years, and so did not recognize her. And it just was amazing how those just simple words of
Hmm.
call JFS and to see it come full circle, which I know you probably see it a lot, but as somebody who's just making the referrals, I don't really get that firsthand moment. I mean, gave her a hug. I told her to stop by the office so my staff could see her. And, you know, just was an amazing moment.
Yeah,
So
that
good
was
job,
wonderful
Nina.
to see the two of you reconnect. That it is all the case managers. We have an amazing team, and they just make the rest of us look good.
What are your goals for strengthening or expanding the vocational services over the next few years?
Um, so we just were funded to work with the Atlantic County Workforce Development Board on their work activity program for people who are receiving TANF or on other benefits. And that's a new type of vocational service we haven't provided before. So we're really excited to see um, how that goes. And then part of why we had wanted to bring IPS to JFS is it's an evidence-based program that has been shown to be effective with people who have justice involvement, who were unhoused, who have serious mental illness. And what we'd like to do is see if we can do more sort of embedding vocational services in other areas so that when you receive one service, we give you as many different things that you could benefit from and have them feel really integrated.
Mm-hmm. Um, and then my last question is, what do you think, what do you hope listeners understand about the impact of JFS has on the workforce development in our region?
I think what I'd like them to understand really is how transformative employment can be, and that's one of the messages that JFS has for people. If you think about it, when you first meet someone, typically one of the first things you say to them is, "What do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so much in our society, a part of how we define ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It's how we identify, so many of us.
and if you had a good day at work, you had a good day. And if you had a bad day at work, then, it wasn't a great day unless it was a day you don't work. And so for that, many people can benefit from that experience of working, and it's not just good for them, that it's good for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
That having more people work makes, our company stronger. It makes people less reliant on other types of assistance. And sometimes you need to, take a second look to see who the person that could be your next good employee is, that it may not be the person you think.
Thank you so much, Nina, for your time. My end question always is there something that you would want to share before we wrap it up? I could talk to you all day long, so
I
I just
think
want to make sure that, you hit everything that you think is important about the vocational services of JFS.
clearly it's something I'm really passionate about, and I could talk about, fully until midnight, but I know you have other things to do. So I think I'll leave it with where we are. I think one more thing is the employment and there are places that provide different services, but when we're talking about employment, we're talking about competitive employment, the same jobs that everybody else is applying for. And that, what we see is that the people we work with can be just as successful as people that you might more typically consider when you're looking to hire. And so,
So,
I think for businesses to be open.
is it as easy as someone just calling the JFS phone number and saying they need help? How do they connect with
So
vocational services?
we will, right now, our vocational services are somewhat dependent on the funders that we have and their criteria. So anyone who's referred from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services or the Division of Developmental Disabilities. We absolutely have programs that can serve them, or people who are young and may have a disability. And then we have some programs that work with individuals who have TANF that are referred through the Atlantic County Workforce Development Board. That being said, if we can't help you, we will help direct you towards the place that can.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you again, Nina.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
One of the best ways to support Melissa and the Mighty Mert podcast is to go to our YouTube page, find the subscribe button, open the menu, and click the bell icon so you actually get alerts when we post new episodes or shorts. For any questions or interest in podcasting, go to legalpodcasting.com.